We do have a quorum, so we'll dive right in. And if we could go ahead and move forward with looking at the minutes from August. Did everyone get a copy of those? Yes. Any questions, corrections, anything we left off? Motion to approve?
Yeah, motion to approve.
I second.
So, thank you, Donna.
I'll go through the roster and get everybody's vote.
Okay.
Keith, how do you vote?
Approve.
Greg, how do you vote?
Approve.
See, Michael?
Approved.
Okay. Donna made the second. Scott, how do you vote?
Approve.
Sharon, how do you vote?
Approve.
All right, and AJ made the motion, so that is approved unanimously.
Awesome. Thank you all. And then following up from our discussion over the past couple of months, we've been talking about the bike plan and how to put together a list of recommendations from our team. Carol, AJ, all of us with our conversations, Carol pulled together the metrics that we talked about over these past couple of meetings and resent some groupings. Did everyone see a copy of what Carol had done? Yes.
Yes.
Any questions around that? We kind of left things off at the last meeting that we agreed that the metrics were the ones that we wanted to use. And so she just went back and restacked our existing votes and the recommendations from the city plan as it stood, layered those metrics in, and has now
Sharon, you're on mute, I think. Somehow we've lost your voice.
Thank you, Greg. That's what happens when I start sliding things around on my screen. Where did I cut out? How about I just start over?
You're talking about Carol Hoover and her recommendations on the bicycle plan, but
right. So taking the metrics that that we had talked about in August, those currently listed routes from the city bicycle master plan have been restacked and reshared with this team. So I'm opening it up now for any conversation or further discussion around what has been shared. And I'm gonna just read through right now using social equity, stress, and latent demand. The top 5 routes would be, and I'm reading these in order, the Forsyth Tech Connector, the Crosstown Connector, Long Branch Trail, Forsyth Medical, and the Walltown route. Did anyone have questions or further comments or discussion around those, or how we came up with those? And Carol is traveling, so she's unable to be here today.
Yeah, I think the way that this ended up was a little surprising to me. Like, I definitely agree with the metrics in principle as we discussed them last month. The top 3 that we ended up, once we implement it that way, are the 3 shortest, I think, out of the entire list. And I was trying to dig into that and just understand why. And I think it's because with some of the longer projects or recommendations, there are inevitably segments that don't hit, and get points for meeting all of the different criteria. You may connect 2 areas that qualify on social equity, but it runs through an area that doesn't. And so I thought that was kind of interesting that our top three become like the smallest, not necessarily the least expensive projects. And just as a gut check, it felt kind of weird. Like one runs from Forsyth Tech, but it bisects Ardmore. The other, with the exception of the easternmost segment, connects Haynes Park and the Innovation Quarter. Like they don't feel like they do the most in terms of social equity based on my very subjective knowledge of town. So I say all that like without a great better idea of how to measure these things. But the top three feel kind of weird based on what we said we wanted to base it on.
Thanks, AJ. I'm kind of in the same boat. I don't know how better to do this. Matthew, if you have any deeper context to share, please feel free. Otherwise, I'm kind of in the same boat with AJ. Looking at it from the surface, I don't know. I don't know how all of this layers up. I can't tell that just as a citizen or driving through, or, there are apartment complexes that we don't see from the road, or there are all these things that we just can't see as individuals, which is how I think we came to the conclusion that taking the data and layering them in was the most appropriate way to do it, but we are certainly open to other conversation and dialogue around this.
I guess the one thought I have is, I think it's okay to have come up with a top five and we start exploring those five. And just because you have one, maybe what place, the exact ranking, I would say, is less critical than coming up with a list of your top priorities among the recommendations in that plan, because we'll have to explore each of those priorities that you identified and see what kind of constraints there are and what opportunities there are. So it may not, work out, the ranking 1 through 5, just as you've mentioned them. But I think if we have a general idea of what you think the priorities are, and you can justify those priorities based on, data from the plan, and which you all have done, I think that's a good step. And we'll just have to explore each of those priorities after this and do some analysis and figure out what the opportunities are.
Sure.
I think the nice thing is that it's a little less subjective than it might otherwise be. I mean, there are routes that I know I ride and I'm on quite a bit that, sure, it would be, beneficial. I know there are a number of more avid cyclists that use those, but the nice thing is that we've tried to be objective about what our goals are. And so I certainly am okay with those top five, because I do think it incorporates a lot of the goals that we've set forward, and it becomes important, especially with the community at large. And as Sharon pointed out, there are things that I don't know. I don't know if there's apartments there, or people that need to get to and from a job and things like that. So I think it's a good starting point. It's a good list for sure.
Thanks, Scott. I'm just comparing the three that in our own votes were Northwest Connector, Parkland South, and Renolda Link. None of those emerged in the top five based on the criteria that Carol utilized. So I'm wondering if we want to, and I'm just throwing this out, please feel free to make other suggestions, put forth look at those top 5 and then add those other 3 as kind of a secondary, let's explore these as well, or as opportunity presents kind of thing? Or do we want to keep it just clean and simple and say, here are the 5 that we recommend be considered? I don't want to overcomplicate this. I'd like to find some way to move forward with a recommendation, whatever
Sure.
that looks like.
One thing I would add is you mentioned the Northwest Connector. That's actually a designed and funded project already. So we are preparing for construction of that one. So yeah, that one can probably be set aside as one that's underway.
Perfect. Thank you.
Now, I should say there's probably 90% of that is funded, either constructed or funded and designed. There's a section along New Walkertown Road that still needs to be addressed, but the bulk of that project is ready to go.
Okay.
Matthew, are there any others in the list that are like that might change our consideration, or is that pretty much the only one?
No, we had our last group of bike lane, shared lane marking projects. We're getting close to wrapping those up. The 2 that were remaining were Northwest Boulevard and Hawthorne Road. And both of those were on hold just because those streets are being resurfaced. So we were waiting for that resurfacing to be complete before we put the bike markings in.
Got it, thanks.
And Long Branch, you have a grant proposal out, but won't hear from that for at least a couple of months, correct?
That's right. Yeah, it should be a couple months. In November is when we should hear back about the status of that request.
Okay. And I'm assuming we can always go back and edit or add to this if we want, as things rotate on or off.
Correct. Yeah, I think, especially once we get into digging in a little bit with the analysis and figuring out what the opportunities are with these, we'll have to shuffle, I think, as we learn more about, the details of each of these corridors and what it would take to actually put infrastructure in.
So again, just throwing out an idea, perhaps what we should do is move forward with recommending the list as it stands, a full ranking, noting that we have a top 5, but keeping sort of the priority order as it is. So instead of just saying, here are 5, we're going to sort of resort and recommend all of these in the order that we have them ranked. Any other thoughts, ideas, suggestions on a better way to do this?
Are we at a point where we could share these recommendations more broadly with like the Winston-Salem cycling advocacy network, WSCAN, or other groups and organizations around the city? Are we at a point where we feel comfortable in sharing this ranking and the how we feel about these projects, and start to get the sort of the feeling out in the community as to what direction we're heading in?
Trying to think of, my gut sense is that we would probably take these up through Matthew's department and look at input from the city side before taking them to the public. Since it's already a public document, I don't know that we're suggesting anything that changes what's already in that public document, since the master plan's online. Are you, Matthew, it looks like.
Yeah, Sharon. Yeah, I mean, the plan was adopted 2 years ago, and this is an action item on the agenda today. So if you all would take action on that to make a recommendation about the priority projects, then that's part of the minutes for the meeting, and so it would certainly be
Fair enough.
The meetings are public and all the minutes are public. So at that point, your recommendation would be part of that public record, and at that point, then we would just start to explore those priorities, and like you said, go through the city process of exploring those then.
And I think, Sharon, like you said, we can adjust these priorities, with changing conditions or other things. I think other feedback from the public can be part of that too, once we've initially made the recommendations. So I'm in agreement then with Sharon, your recommendation of just providing the full ranked list at this point. I think, are we at a point where that's what we want to do, is potentially, are we looking for a motion to do that?
Yes.
Okay, I motion that we provide the list based on those rankings that align with, I guess, Carol's latest email. I'm making sure that's the rank that includes like social equity, stress, and latent demand. I think that's what we're all talking about. Okay.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you both.
Sharon, would you read off just that list of those top priority projects again one more time?
Sure. And the top 5 in order are the Forsyth Tech, the Crosstown Connector, the Long Branch. Oops, wait, I've written them down wrong. Hang on, sorry. Forsyth Tech Connector, Crosstown Connector, Long Branch Trail, Forsyth Medical, and Waughtown Route were the top 5. And then continuing in order would be Bethabara, Louisville, Northwest Connector, Parkland South, Walkertown, and then it goes on from there.
Okay.
Send this.
So we have a motion and a second, so I'll go through the list for voting. Keith, how do you vote? Okay. Greg?
I'm okay with it.
Okay. Michael?
In favor.
Okay. Donna?
Sure.
Okay. Scott?
Approve. In favor.
Scott had seconded.
Thank you. Sharon?
Approve.
And AJ made the motion. All right, so that passes unanimously.
And again, these will be revisited based on opportunities or other changes as they emerge.
Not sure if this is a question for Sharon or Matthew, but can you confirm with that list now, what's the timing or plan for it to go, I guess, Matthew, through your department to the city council?
Well, so what we would do is we'll discuss it internally within our department first, and make sure that we have some agreement within the department, and then once we get to a stage of allocating funds, then we would get council's approval most likely. Now they have adopted the plan already, so really they're in favor. They've voted in favor of these priorities. So I think I'm not exactly sure. I think we'll have to just have that discussion internally within our department first, and just make sure everybody's okay with these priorities, and then we can start exploring them. But I can certainly report back at the next meeting on what we'll need to do.
Got it. Thanks.
Great. Thank you all. I know that's still fuzzy, but I think that's just the nature of the beast. Okay, so moving kind of backwards and forwards simultaneously. In April, I guess it was, we had talked about just kind of an overarching goals for this committee. We've worked through some of that. We've supported the pedestrian plan, the walkable Winston-Salem. We've narrowed down some recommendations now from the bicycle master plan. And then some other things that were on that list were increasing awareness and communication of pedestrian laws, right-of-way, non-vehicular safety, and micromobility options across the community. At the tail end of our last meeting, there's some things that came up around communication, and I'm wondering if that might be the next area to dive into. How we communicate, how information gets shared, who are the groups and places out there that people are getting information, and how we can sort of collaborate and streamline some of that more. Would you all be in agreement that be our next sort of focused area? And I'll give just the goal 4 was, and just to go back and read the 4 goals, it was the bike-friendly city application, which is in process, Matthew's doing, walk-friendly city designation, communication, and then the 4th one was rail trail opportunities, which is a little bit on off the table. It just seems like this is one that we could dive into and probably get some action around and start building awareness for what we do, cycling advocacy, walking groups, kind of pulling all of that together somehow, as well as liaisoning more effectively with the city communications team. Thanks, Scott. Have a good week.
Bye, everybody.
Oh, there comes the thunder. Any thoughts around that? I'm sort of just in my head as I think about that. I kind of envision that we pull together a document a little bit similar to what Carol did with the bicycle routes. We need a list first. What groups are out there? Where do we currently get information? Where do our friends get information? What gets shared? And then maybe from that, look at how we can push out information from the Department of Transportation, city communications, all these other places. As an example, I think it was Monday, City of Winston-Salem posted that Salem Lake would close the next day. There'd probably been other communications leading up to that, but I was kind of oh, that's tomorrow, kind of where can we, and then, scrambling, I need to get this shared across other platforms. We need to get this message out. Or there's a vote on an event center at Tanglewood that has sort of caught the community a little bit off guard. And so how do we better bring some consolidated communication across all these various groups that are out there engaged basically in some aspect of this work or this interest. Anyone else excited by that as a topic area?
I'll chime in. Sharon, I think it was you that shared the Tanglewood thing that I ended up getting and then passing on, and I don't remember which organization, but it's just amazing to me how some of those things trickle through and some don't. And those are important topics, clearly. And so, I think from day one, I felt like just getting word out from this committee could be one of the most important things we do, just to get more people activated and involved and informed. I would think that would be well worth our time to just make sure that what we're doing and what other groups are doing can be consolidated and communicated.
Sorry, I have to rescue a dog from the rain real quick.
It got awfully dark really quickly.
Yeah, so much for rain starting at 3 o'clock. Okay. Anyone else have thoughts around that?
I've got a couple thoughts. I guess for the stuff that's pending and happens on the fly, I guess I kind of think of like a phone tree type thing, but more like an email list of just the heads of different groups. Make sure, and just kind of blast. If you get it and you've got, 6, 7, 10 different groups and you've got the email contact of the leader, you could, send a blast and be like, hey, this just came across the pipeline. Please share with your members. And then, and I don't know, that's not necessarily on you, Sharon, just an idea, throwing it out there. And then if we do get kind of like a printed, ongoing informational kind of thing, we can put that in with the Safe Kids packets whenever we do the bike safety presentations. A lot of that information goes home to parents. So that could be just a piece of paper or something that has good information about upcoming initiatives or whatever. I mean, that can evolve, and we're going to be doing monthly bike safety presentations at different events and in schools, and so that could be another area where we can distribute. And even some of the events, we already have some events scheduled. A representative could be there to even hand out the paper and pass verbal information on and just talk to people, and I think it'll kind of build on itself as when you're out there in the field and you're meeting people, then those champions might come to the forefront and be like, oh, you live in this neighborhood, you're really excited about it. Can we tap into you and your connectivity to your local neighborhood and stuff? Certainly a building process, but I think those are some solid ways to kind of get a lead on it.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Kind of simplifies things. You don't have to reach everybody. You just have to reach the key people. Let them do their part. So I guess the question for now is are we in agreement that this is our next sort of goal bucket topic that we want to delve into, strategize around?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that. I think it's a good idea.
Okay, great. We'll start off, our October meeting talking more about that. And I think in the meantime, it just, some awareness in the next several weeks, paying attention to what groups you're members of, what types of information you get from them. And if we could, just shoot me an email with a list or links to your Facebook groups that you like, or issues that you see, or anything else related to communication. I'll try to pull together something to start from to get the conversation going the next meeting. Matthew was going to share, let's see, it's 9:30, so we're doing great on time. Matthew was going to share some updates around micromobility. Are you ready to do that now, Matthew?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. So, the shared mobility program here that includes a number of things. One, the Flow Bikes program that Michael and the Cycling Center manage. But because that is a docked system, with stations throughout the community, it's managed a little bit differently than how some of the other or how the dockless programs are. So, just a little background. And the dockless right now is really just the electric scooters. So back in 2018, when Bird scooters first arrived here, it was August of 2018. They showed up one day without any coordination with the city or anybody else, and that went on for about 3 months, and we just wound up having a number of issues with that, with communications with them, and a number of other issues related to their operations. And at that point, the city council asked us to work on an ordinance that would manage those micromobility companies and then set up rules for how not only the company should operate, but also how users should operate those devices. So we worked on that ordinance, and city council adopted an ordinance in March of 2019. And that ordinance, like I said, it set rules for how people would use those devices, where they could ride, where they couldn't ride, the parking issues. But it also set up a process for working with the companies. So it basically set up a permit process that we go through annually to select vendors who would provide those dockless shared mobility programs. So the way the ordinance is set up, we have the option to issue up to 2 permits per kind of class of device. So we can issue 2 permits to electric scooter operators. We can issue permits to dockless bike share operators. And then we set up this other 3rd category for other devices. And the thought with that was, the field is evolving pretty rapidly. There's a lot of change happening on an annual basis, and we wanted the ordinance to be able to respond to whatever that next device might be. If there's something else that's coming behind electric scooters, then we would be prepared to account for that. So every year we go through this permit application process. We accept applications from shared mobility vendors. The first year we did this in 2019. We received a handful of electric scooter permit applications, and then 1 dockless bike share application as well. And we wound up offering, we offered 2 electric scooter permits as the ordinance allows, and we actually offered that dockless bike share permit as well, but the company declined it. So something had changed with their operations, and they declined that permit. So we had 2 electric scooter operators for the 2019-2020 year. And then last year we went through the process again, and we had two new vendors apply, and we issued those 2 vendors a permit. So those are the companies, Spin and Blue Duck, that are operating right now. And just in July, August, now into September, we've gone through the process for the 21-22 permit season. So we're in the middle of that right now. We convened part of what the ordinance requires is that we convene a selection committee. So we requested participation from the Transit Authority and from the Downtown Partnership, from Solutions for Independence, which is a disability rights advocacy group and assistance group. And then we had our vehicle for hire inspector, and I think that is it. So we convened that committee, and we've been reviewing the applications that have come in. And probably over the next couple of weeks, we will make a decision on who to offer permits to for this coming year. So that's where we are in the process right now. and all of that is set up in the ordinance and required in that ordinance that we go through that process every year. So we can really, it's set up so we can evaluate the performance of the companies and address any issues that have come up on an annual basis. And it keeps it flexible for us. So I don't know if anybody has any questions. I'm happy to answer any questions about shared mobility in general, or about the permit process, or what we hope to accomplish, or anything really. So I'll open it up to the group.
Does the city collect any revenues outside of permit fees? Is that taxable in any way?
So we collect permit application fees. So in order for companies to apply, there's a fee associated with that, and then there's a device fee. The ordinance set up that device fee as well. So it's that device fee is tied to the type of device. So electric scooters, the annual device fee for each device is $100. So depending on the size of the fleet that the companies propose, the fee fluctuates accordingly. I think it's $50 for electric bicycles and then $25 for standard bicycles. But to date, the only permits we've issued were to electric scooter companies, because that's really who's requested a permit. But we do collect those fees for the devices.
Does the city receive any data? I know it's changed year to year and stuff, but just about usage, and thinking about it from just the citizen standpoint, like how much of a benefit these have been, or how much they are being used. Do you have anything on that?
Yeah, so that's definitely one of the aspects that's been most beneficial for us, is that because each of the devices is GPS enabled, we can see where those rides are originating, where they're ending, and then where the routes that people are taking. So it's all anonymized, so we don't see individual names associated with rides, but we get that aggregate data that we can see generally where people are riding the scooters, where the trips are beginning, where they're ending. And then also if the companies are meeting requirements in the ordinance. So for instance, we have an equity requirement in the ordinance that requires a certain percentage of the scooters to be stationed in low income areas, to ensure that that transportation option is available for everybody. So we can use the data to on a daily basis track whether those companies are meeting those equity goals, and that's just one example. There's any number of data tracking that we have access to. So we're using that as a way to enforce the requirements in the ordinance. So yeah, and I'd be happy to share that. I can, we prepare monthly reports, and we require monthly reports from the companies. And so I'd be happy to, in an email, I can send out an example of one of those data reports. I think, one thing we've noticed is you can see that the trends in ridership, say from January through July, as as the weather improves and as people come and go, you can see the trends in ridership, and as those number of rides increase and decrease. I think one thing we've noticed that the locations for the rides has stayed pretty static. That the ridership is definitely centered in the downtown area, and there are certain corridors specifically that have seen a lot of ridership. So that hasn't changed a whole lot, but it certainly is interesting to see the timing of ridership, and even during the day, the timing of the ridership. So that's all information that I can share with the group. I guess one question I would have for the group is that has there been, from your experience, have you noticed any benefit or detriment to cycling and walking related to electric scooters? I think that's one of the things, one of the reasons we have the annual permit process, so that we can address issues as they come up, and we're not we're not locked into a certain company for several years, so that we can adjust and address issues as they come up a little more easily. So I'd be curious to hear about just general perspectives and general experiences with shared mobility in the community.
Is there any mechanism for like incident reporting?
There is. So that both, the companies that we have operating right now, they both have, there are a number of ways you can get in contact with them, either through their apps or they have 800 numbers, they have email contacts. So that's what we encourage people to do, because those companies are required to address issues. Say there's a scooter in the middle of a sidewalk somewhere. If somebody reports that, they're required to solve, to fix that issue within 2 hours. And they have been responsive. I think one of the challenges we face is just getting that information to the companies. If people see an issue, do they know how to report that issue, and are they doing so? So yeah, that mechanism is in place. I think it's just a matter of sharing that publicly, and I think that comes back to the previous item you discussed, the communications plan. That could certainly be part of that communication, making people aware of the requirements of these companies and how they can, how people can be involved with that process.
Yeah, I think any feedback I would have at this point would be colored by personal opinion, so that be able to blend that with some actual data would be helpful.
Yeah, same. I have not personally used either scooter vendor, and so I don't know. Maybe if I had the app or something, I would know how to report if I see scooters blocking a sidewalk or something. I'd probably just move them if I was there, but that's my personal experience. But I'm quite interested to see, I guess, some of the data on ridership and understand the benefit, since I'm not personally experiencing that side of it. But that would be it. Kind of, I think, increased communication for people who have to interact with the scooters but are not using them and maybe are missing out on some of the information because they don't have the app.
One thing that I've kind of noticed over the years is I feel like the scooters have been, they're a couple times, definitely you see them occasionally kind of laying on the sidewalk in the way. But yeah, from what I can tell, that seems to be, they do address that pretty quickly. But I think that it's gotten a lot more people engaged in micromobility. People that wouldn't necessarily have rented the bikes before saw the scooter as like, oh, this is fun, a toy almost, which to the detriment sometimes, because people would be riding the wrong way down the road or being just careless on the scooters in downtown, not really recognizing that they're putting themselves in danger by being on the road. It's kind of like there just was something was missing, just the reality of what was going on. But I think as time has gone, we've been into it 3 years now. I think that some of those folks are starting to gravitate towards the bike share, which they might not necessarily have done before. So I definitely see it as a positive thing overall. Just kind of getting more people just open to the idea of non-traditional, transportation. But yeah,
I agree. Didn't mean to cut you off, but it's like the first round of this sort of was what are these things? Why are they here? Kind of the immediate backlash of annoyance from a lot of residents. And I know there were issues with the bird scooters initially, but this sort of second wave, and I think maybe the pandemic has been part of that too, with more people just staying home. But even the comment on a couple of the neighborhood groups that tend to be pretty inflammatory have definitely changed. It's a lot more people are aware of why these are a good thing, what they offer to people who may not have other transportation means. A lot of the younger people love them. The bikes I see used all the time and in all kinds of places. So I think just overall, it seems to be, we had our testing phase, and now now people are a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more aware, and I think they just seem to be a lot of fun for the most part and offer needed form of transportation. We see these in other places. It's much more common in other places. It was kind of new and a little bit of a shock here, but people seem to be getting used to it.
Yeah, to follow up on that, this was really the first full season of ridership, you know, in the spring of 2020, that both of the companies that had been operating shut down their operations with the onset of the pandemic. So up until now, we haven't had a full year of ridership. So, you know, beginning last October when we issued those permits, up until now, this is really the first 12-month period that we've had you know, the devices on the streets for that continuous period.
This is a
scooter. Are the scooters being applied in the other smaller towns around Winston-Salem? Are they available in Kernersville and Louisville and so forth?
Not that I'm aware of. You know, it would be up to the companies to determine where they want to operate, so that, you know, they will typically approach the communities that they're interested in. I think, you know, to date, there haven't been any, not that I'm aware of, any companies that have requested to operate in those communities.
Would they have to come through the city of Winston-Salem for permits, or Forsyth County, or the individual towns, or how would that work?
Yeah, the individual towns. So the cities are managing the programs. So yeah, if a company wanted to come to Kernersville, for example, they would probably reach out to the town, and the town would then, you know, they could set up a similar permit process as to what we use here. They could really manage it any way they desire.
This will go in the bucket of complete brainstorm. Is there any utility of having some type of public assistance program to make these more resourceful for people that might, you know, just give them another option for transportation, people that are struggling with transportation?
So one of the requirements in the ordinance is that the companies make allowances and figure out ways to encourage ridership, you know, in low income communities. So they both have discounted rates. For instance, if customers can show you know, certain economic need, then typically it's like a 50% discount on the rides. And then there are also, you know, the companies have options for payments other than credit cards, and ways to interact with the companies other than through smartphones. So that's one of the requirements that we have in the ordinance. And one of the questions that we ask them in the permit application is, you know, how are you going to reach those communities and you know, encourage ridership among those people?
You know, just knowing that, I think if the public knew that, like, that would be a great topic for our communication channel, you know, just to let people know, you know, these are more than just I mean, if somebody sees it as a nuisance, if they could see the positive, that's a positive to me.
Right. Yeah, and you know, connecting it to the transportation system is certainly the goal. You know, the scooters have a place especially with transit ridership, you know, to be able to pick up a scooter at, say, the transit center and continue your trip from there on a scooter. You know, there's certainly a benefit there to connecting the different elements of our transportation system together. And I think the scooters have a role in that. So yeah, whatever we can do to promote that and encourage that use. I know, for instance, the National Cycling Center put a bike share station at the transit center recently in coordination with the Transit Authority. So, you know, I think we're always thinking about ways that we can kind of connect those different modes together to make it easier for people to get around.
That's great. I didn't know that either.
I'll say this as it goes for the bike share. You know, we certainly want ridership. I mean, it's not, yes, it generates revenue, but that's not the goal, is to generate revenue. It's really to get people using it. So the obstacles are that you have to have a bank account, you have to have a smartphone, and those obstacles are absolutely, barriers are real. But what I can say is once you kind of get plugged in, it's very easy for us to gift annual memberships and just other things. So this is an invitation to everybody on the committee. If you haven't tried the bike share, I encourage you to get signed up and go ahead and I can gift everybody a annual membership. And what that does is it gives you the first hour free every time you rent a bike, and then it's it's $1 every 30 minutes after that. But if nothing else, that would get you guys on there firsthand and kind of getting on the street and get familiar. I find every time I'm checking a station out that somebody's there and they're trying to figure out and navigate the system. So I always try to take an opportunity to educate people and, oh, this is how you lock it, this is how you unlock it, this is how it works. So the more folks we have out there using the system and familiar with it, then the more communication that we can just spread just organically. And that offer isn't limited just to you guys. So if you have friends and family or anybody you know, certainly, I don't know if you guys all have my cell phone number, but yeah, you could even just shoot me a text saying, hey, I just signed up the bike share, and I handle all the back end stuff on the dashboard. So I see all the users and where things are at. And so I know that's kind of low level, providing opportunities, and I'm certainly open for all suggestions. It's just honestly, it's Mike Cobbler and we're the only ones kind of operating the bike share. So it's, we're kind of doing everything we can to keep it going, but we certainly welcome any advice, feedback, support that you got. So yeah, I'm all ears and here. We're here for the community for sure.
That's great. Thank you. Right. Any other updates from the group? Michael mentioned last time that the Cycling Classic is coming up, and that's now 2 weeks away, right? 3 weeks away, 2 weeks away, 2 weeks away. I think Matthew or anyone, I know Michael had mentioned there's a call for volunteers. Are you having a booth at the event?
Yeah, so I talked to Michael about that, and it sounds like we can set up a tent and we'll have some information there to share about, say the bike plan and the recommendations that this group made and the recently adopted pedestrian plan and all the projects that are going on right now. And Greenway maps, we can make all of that available at the event.
So again, if anyone would like to volunteer, help out at Matthew's booth, I imagine he would gladly take some support on that.
Certainly.
Anything else from the team? Any other updates, information to share? I would just put a plug in, remind you to fill out that survey for the Tanglewood event space if you haven't already. That impacts walking and cycling access there. Salem Lake Greenway, I haven't seen a map, but am I correct that the Greenway is closed as well as the Lake Marina? Matthew, do you know exactly?
I don't know. So my thought is that it's related to the phase, the Salem Lake Park restoration, and I would have to check with the Recreation and Parks Department what the plan is for that. Timing is.
I don't want to misspeak, but I don't think that I think it's that other parking lot by the playground is where they're closed off, but I think the marina's still open and the trail around the lake's still open. I don't think they're shutting that down.
Okay, I thought I saw in the announcement that a section of the Greenway from Reynolds Park to somewhere was closed, but I may have misread that. I need to go back. The marina is closed. Thank you, Larry. And I know they're draining the lake, so no boating at all.
Yes, the Creek Greenway is closed from the lake to Reynolds Park Road.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for that update.
Okay.
Is that a long-term closure?
It says until further
90
notice.
days?
60, 90 days, yeah. Well, that's for the water level. I don't know if the Greenway closure is the same duration. I just sent a link that has the little flyer of the construction announcement, but it doesn't give them much more detail.
Thank you. All right, and Matthew, I don't know if you saw Donna would like to volunteer.
Okay. Thank you, Donna.
Okay. We are 3 minutes out. I think we're actually wrapping up early. Nice to see everyone. We'll reconvene in October, except for those who will be at the Cycling Classic. Anything else, feel free to email anytime, get in touch, and enjoy the cooler weather. Much needed. All right. Thanks
Take
all.
care, everybody.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye.